Hello again. I wanted to, my Docker's trying to update while I'm doing this, so I might get another pop-up. But today I wanted to go over DynamoDB. This is another serverless, I guess you could call it, service from AWS. DynamoDB is a NoSQL database, and since I just did a video on RDS, which is a relational database, a SQL database, wanted to do one on the alternative, which is DynamoDB. I've used Mongo in the past, and um, it's along the same lines. It's kind of free flowing. You can add stuff in as you need to. It's pretty much just a big JSON object. I will point out something right from the start. I haven't gone down other avenues, but I've worked with DynamoDB before, and I have been told from the very start to use something to avoid a lot of headache in the future, to use something called the DynamoDB document client. The reason for doing that is DynamoDB requires these attribute values, so you have to kind of type your input as you give it. So add in string, and S for string, N for number, bool for boolean, so on and so forth. If you use the document client, this is specifically with JavaScript, you just give it an object. You give the document client an object, and it will format all of this correctly. Because if you don't format it correctly, it'll get upset at you. I could have sworn I just had it out. Let me try to find it real quick. This one, this link. So this is an example of what I'm talking about. The params when you do a get, or I guess here's a put. The params are just key and value, which is what you're used to if you code in JavaScript or in Python, I guess. Just the dictionary or map, key value. With DynamoDB, we'll see it once. I'll enter in a few entries once we create a table, but you'll see it looks different. You have to add in it, or it adds in these attribute values so it knows what type it's looking at before it gets to the value. So I'm going to go ahead and just dive into building a CloudFormation template. I have my VPC stack up, which is pretty much just the default VPC. I just like to have my own copy of it. And the only thing you can really do with DynamoDB, from what I understand, I haven't built out a CloudFormation template for this before, but I have used DynamoDB before. It's the database is managed by AWS. You just create tables in that database, and then you can reference those tables. So for instance, in here you would just reference the table, and everything else, there's no database here that you're referencing, whereas with RDS or as a normal SQL database, you would reference the database that you're trying to connect to when you create the connection. That's not the same here. Since it's all managed by AWS, you just connect using the DynamoDB document client, and then you can query. I guess this is the query. This is a get on the table name, and everything else, it knows where to point. And I did a quick look before I started this video. Went to the DynamoDB CloudFormation reference, and this is actually the only thing under DynamoDB is the DynamoDB table. So it really is just a table. I think this video will be a lot shorter because it's just a table. That's pretty much all there is to it. You're just saying you want a table with a specific name, and it'll spin it up. And that's more or less what I wanted to do. Just go over what that looks like. I'm sure there are a lot more ins and outs to this that I'm not going to cover in depth, but I just want to get something up and something running, and then I'll have a default DynamoDB template for my CloudFormation reference repository. So I'll just go ahead and kick it right off. Um, First, I know I'm going to need this. I'll go ahead and add in parameters. I know I'm going to want the name in there. It's probably good. And then keep going to my Spotify. Then in here we have our resource. This is our table. We know we're doing a DynamoDB table. Let's go through this and see what it all looks like. I bet a lot of it is required. Attribute definitions. Required. This is required. Interesting why it says it's conditional. If I remember correctly, there are some things to define from the start and how the tables index themselves. And you can do combinations of indices and whatnot and use foreign indices. So let's go ahead and see what attribute definitions are. Attribute name and type. Okay. Well, that's pretty straightforward, I guess. I'll go ahead and just use attribute name. I'll use ID like a GUID would be, I guess. So attribute name, I'll call it ID, and I'll just make it a string. So there's that. It's our attribute definition. I think that's all I need for that. Describing the key schema. And then sure, let's add another one in here. We'll call it text, and that will also be a string. So we'll have an ID and then we'll have text. I'm not designing a very intricate database, but billing mode. Default is provisioned. Interesting. Let's see. Provisioned versus pay per request. Pay per request sounds to me like it would cost more per request, but maybe not if, yeah. It probably just depends on what your use is. Okay. I'll go ahead and leave it as provisioned, but know that there is a difference between these two. My guess is the pricing is going to be significantly different. I think at one point in time, I remember someone telling me about these capacity units. So read and write capacity units cost a different amount. So you want to set that. Oh, here's a pricing page. You want to set that up correctly. So you have on-demand and capacity. Let's do on-demand first. Read and write requests. So it's in the millions. This is for on-demand. And if you want provisioned, read and write requests are that many cents per unit. So a WCU for a write. What? One RCU. Okay. I'm guessing write capacity unit. Yeah, read capacity unit. And that's how many? So yeah, so that's definitely not in the millions that we're talking about. What's that? That's So you need 100,000 of these write units to equal $6. And on the on demand, this is provisioned. On demand, you need 1,000,000 to equal $1. So on demand is cheaper, interestingly enough. So pay per request would be cheaper. I'm saying this not knowing much about it. If this is something that you're going to be using a lot of, I recommend looking into the actual cost benefit analysis, because you probably get better speeds with predictable workloads versus unpredictable workloads. That's what it sounds like to me. But it might be cheaper if you pay per request. This seems like more of a Lambda function type thing, and this seems more of an EC2 type thing, which is why I'm saying that. And if it's provisioned like an EC2, it might cost more, but over the long run, depending on how much tolerance you have for latency or delay or anything like that, not that Lambdas take a long time to spin up, but you might want an EC2 over a Lambda function. Either way, moving on. Global secondary indices. Okay, yeah, so DynamoDB, I think it's deeper than what I'm going to get into in this video. This is just going to be a very high level glance at it. There's obviously a lot more in here because I've gone through, 3 different properties, and I haven't had a really good explanation for any of them so far. So keep an eye out for that. I think global secondary indices, there's a way to connect it to other tables. Yeah. Again, I'm not as well versed in DynamoDB as the other AWS offerings. Key schema. Aha, so here we go. So this is where you define, so I guess you have your attribute definitions, which would be like defining your columns in SQL table. I thought you could just add them on demand, but maybe not. Like I said, I haven't worked with it very much. Then key schema. This must be where you actually define which attributes are indices. Okay. Range or hash. I'm guessing hash is probably faster overall, but range is if you're, I'm going to go ahead and guess, it's probably quicker if you sort tables a lot or if you use offsets a lot. I'm going to go ahead and guess, but I have no idea. So for this guy, we have attribute name, ID, and then key type. I'll just do hash. I'll just use a GUID as the ID in my examples. So a hash will work just fine. Local secondary indices. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot in DynamoDB that I don't know that much about, all these different indices. There's a lot in database administration that I don't know much about, so that's a big world. People make entire careers out of just working with databases. Point-in-time recovery specification. This allows you to enable point-in-time recover. Let's see what those are, but my guess is I won't want to do anything with it. It's probably false by default. I'm just going to leave it that way. I'm not guessing it's just a way to back up, or how often it backs up your database table, but for what I'm doing, I don't need any backups. I don't really care about it. Provision throughput. Okay. So this is where you provision your read capacity units and write capacity units. Yeah, but this gets into a lot of like cost benefit analysis. I'm sure there's a ton in there that you could dive into that I wouldn't even be able to scratch the surface for. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete those for now. SSE specification, server-side encryption. So there's KMS type stuff, it looks like. Yeah, there's your KMS master key. Um, if it's false or not specified, server-side encryption is sent to AWS-owned CMK. So that's fine. I guess that just means that AWS is using their own key to encrypt the data server side for DynamoDB. Fine by me. Stream. I am not doing any streaming. I think you could hook DynamoDB up to a Lambda function so that it any changes that come in also go to a Lambda function for kind of like post-processing. A name for the table. I like letting CloudFormation create names for me. If you specify a name, you cannot perform updates that require replacement of this resource. You can perform updates that require no or some interruption. If you must replace the resource, specify a new name. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and leave it blank. I'm just going to I think CloudFormation just makes a hash more or less. So tags, no tags, TTL. You can use DynamoDB as a cache. So I'm guessing that's what this is for. So you can expire things as they come in, which is super cool. There is a combination where you use, I guess this is this a required field? If it's not required, I'm going to leave it blank, and my guess is it's going to default to no TTL, but you can use DynamoDB directly with API Gateway to create a cache of sorts. So you can put to API Gateway, and it goes directly to DynamoDB, and you can get from the API Gateway, and it goes directly to DynamoDB. There's no, all the processing is just done automatically. My guess is that AWS has a Lambda function in the middle that it just automatically creates. That's boilerplate. Get these fields from the table or put these fields to the table instead of you coming up with your own Lambda function. It's just kind of built in, which is a super cool feature. I've used it in the past, and it's been awesome. And then you can also tie in a Lambda on a cron, and it can populate the DynamoDB table if nothing's been put, or you can only allow gets from the API gateway, and the Lambda function on a cron constantly puts. That's another way to do it. Yeah, tons of cool things you can do with AWS. I don't know if this is going to work, but it might, and that would be a pretty quick video if it does. So let's see what happens. Oh, well, I included a table name, but here, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. No, I'm not going to allow a table name, but I am going to output the table name. And the reason I'm going to output it is because I could very easily see this being fed into a Lambda function that uses it. I'm guessing, let's see what are the return values. It'll return the table name. So I'll just have to ref it. Perfect. And that would be it. So the name will be created for me automatically, and then I can get it from my output. Then from my output, I can shove it in an environment variable for a Lambda function, so the Lambda function knows the name of the table it's writing to. Interesting. The attribute definition. Okay, so the attribute definitions are only used for the key schema. Okay. Cool. That means that I might not have been totally off base by saying you can just add any data to the table that you want whenever you want. The attribute definition and key schema must be just for the indexing. Let's see if it's got. All right, it's starting to set up. Yep. I don't know how long this is going to take, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. I'll be right back. Well, it did not take long to make the table, but I am back, and let's take a look at what resulted. So DynamoDB, there's the DB table, and there it is in my outputs, and that's pretty easy. So to look at the data in it, you would go, well, there's probably a ton of awesome things about this that I just don't know about. So yeah, TTL was disabled. Let's see. Point in time. Yeah, there's a lot that I should probably learn about DynamoDB. Doesn't look like there's anything right now, so let's go ahead and create an item. We have the ID. I'll just call it ASDF. And then I'm going to append a map called my map. And then in this map, I'm going to add a string called my map string. And it's going to say hello, and I'm going to save it. And there we get an idea of what the document, oh, I lost that tab, what the document client does for us. So all of this, well, let me go ahead and I'll make this all happen. I'll make mine look like this. I want to add a string, my string world. Then I want to add a number, call my number 100. Then I want to add a boolean, call my bool, and I'll make it true. If we save this, oh, it's not going to show me unless it's in my map, I bet. Okay. I will add these in there real quick. My map, number 100, and then my map bool is true. Let's save that. So this is all the gobbledygook that the document client takes out for you. So these ones, if it's at this top level column, I guess it doesn't show you what that attribute value would have been, but in the map it does. So the map, in the document client, if it wasn't the document client, each key, the value would not just be a value, it would be a map with the key being either, or I guess any. Let me find the next one that I'm looking for. Any of these attribute values, so s, bool, and whatever, and then the value of that first key, which is the only key in here, would be the actual value, and that's what we're seeing here. So disregard my map bool or my map because it doesn't show us what it looks like, but within here we have a key called my map, and then the value of that is actually an object with the one and only key in that object being bool, which is the corresponding attribute value here, and then the value of that being the actual value. My map number, it's an n for number, and then we have the number in string format. So S for string, hello, and so on and so forth. So that's what the document client kind of abstracts out for you. And if you just use the GUI, you can more or less see the same thing. So that's the reason for using the document client. But that was a lot easier, and I guess you could say a lot easier than I thought it would be, which is more or less good because I don't think DynamoDB is supposed to be very complex. And yeah, that concludes the video of showing how to make a DynamoDB table. So thank you for watching, and I will upload that CloudFormation template to my GitHub repo. Yep, thanks for watching.